Edinburgh overturn a 13-point deficit to beat Gloucester. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Just a bit of a side note before we get going on the game. I have to say I much prefer this jersey, which is last year's Edinburgh jersey, to this season's. At least for my taste, I think it's a little bit too busy, and, if you've seen them play this year, you'll kind of know what I mean. But Edinburgh fans, let me know what you think down in the comments. Also, I also think the away jersey from last year, the orange one, I really like that. I don't have that. I'm hoping at some stage to be able to get it. Going to keep an eye out for it coming up on some websites and stuff. But let's get into the game. So really was, certainly in terms of scoring, a game of two halves. And, I think the first half, for me at least, the story of it was Gloucester were absolutely clinical and Edinburgh lacked accuracy at key times. So we start off with Gloucester get a great start. They break the line on the right. Atkinson finds Hadaway, who goes over to score. Conversions missed 5-0. And that try basically came from an Edinburgh knock-on and Gloucester being able to transition pretty quickly and get out to the width where they were able to kind of pick away through that Edinburgh defence. Then Edinburgh look to respond. They go through phases. They had a scrum on the edge of 22. They're going through phases into 22, but then Darcy Graham is isolated, and I think it was Ruskins gets over the ball to win a penalty for Gloucester. Then Duhan van der Merwe thinks he scored as he crashes over in the corner, but the final pass from Freddie Douglas was forward, and he had the opportunity to give it a little bit earlier as well. And the way that Van der Merwe scored, you just know that he would have finished it. But Van der Merwe, but the whistle had already gone as soon as the pass went, because very obviously forward. And, Van der Merwe obviously didn't hear it, though, unfortunately for him. But still, I thought Edinburgh did well to create that space out wide. Gloucester then, they extend their lead from the tee. Edinburgh not looking after the ball again at the breakdown, very sloppy, and as they kind of scramble to try and stop Gloucester taking advantage, there is a bit of a high tackle there, and it's 8-0 now. Edinburgh then, they stretch Gloucester on the left. Vellacott with several involvements, including just a lovely jinking run. He's ducking through tackles, spinning, and he's involved, and as I said, a number of times. And then I thought he did well when, he received the pass. He's maybe about 5 meters out. He gets tackled a couple of meters short of the line. But then he releases, gets back to his feet, and I thought he stayed very composed, because a lot of players in that position would, not quite get back to their feet and try and almost lunge at the line. But he kept his cool and he was able to get over to score. The conversions missed were at 8-5. Edinburgh then shifted in their own 22 and they get it wide out to Van der Merwe, and they're looking to basically go coast to coast. And then he's got Curry outside him, he gives him the ball, but then Curry, as he kind of drops the ball to kick it on, pulls up. He's obviously, pulled a muscle or done some kind of damage, and he was replaced by Piers O'Connor. So, we wish Curry a very speedy recovery, as you do any players that get injured. I always say I hate seeing rugby players getting injured, because it's such a short career, and you never know which, when someone leaves the pitch like that, if they're ever going to come back, because sometimes it looks like, not a bad injury, and then suddenly, the guy, his career is over. So I don't think that's going to be the case for Curry, but still, it's very frustrating, again, as it's such a short career to have that interruption with injury. It's not just about missing the games. It's about then, coming back, and suddenly the landscape in terms of trying to get your place in the team has completely changed, because you've just, you've been out of the picture for so long. Next then, Gloucester, changing, I think it was changing the bind the ball, or maybe I think they definitely changed the bind the ball, but they might have come in at the side as well. And Edinburgh decided to kick to the corner from the penalty. And you feel like it's a great chance here, but Gloucester steal the line out and Edinburgh get pinged for playing the man in the air. Then we have a rare Gloucester attack, and that actually nets them a penalty because Edinburgh stray offside. Barton makes it 11 points to 5. Edinburgh then change their entire front row with 10 minutes to go to the break. Obviously, a set, set of substitutions there from them. Gloucester then crossing at the restart. Edinburgh kick to the corner again. Gloucester steal the line out again, and they're able to clear. Then we have a side entry at the Mall, and Edinburgh to the corner once more. Gloucester, though, force a knock on as the Mall disintegrates, and just some very good defence from them. But again, that inaccuracy from Edinburgh in that first half. Gloucester then strike just before the break. They attack off a scrum, and the scrum, it was Houston, right? He's playing a fullback. Sometimes he plays a 10, but he's playing fullback today. There was a high ball, and he kind of had to stretch to try and catch it, and he knocks it on. So that gives the scrum away, and that was right out on the right touchline as Gloucester are attacking, and they move it right to left. Hathaway sells a dummy to Graham, gets in behind the line, brings the play up to the edge of the 22. Austin then with a clever hanging kick into the in-goal area, and it's Atkinson who gets there first to score. That's converted then for 18 points to 5, and that's a halftime score. And, Edinburgh would be, I think a lot of Edinburgh fans at halftime would be just thinking, it's typical of the Edinburgh team, right? They're such a frustrating team, to watch and to support. I think just in terms of the number of chances they made. There's so many times they were, on the cusp of breaking through that Gloucester defence, and then the pass would go to ground, or alignment would be slightly off. And yeah, you were thinking at that stage, I think most were thinking like, this is a great chance, the way the pool is, and they're blowing it. But then second half comes. So first of all, Edinburgh, they've got a very kickable penalty, but they decide they're going to go to the corner. It's very clear that they're even though they are 13 points behind, they're thinking about, we want to get a 5-point win, not a 4-point win. So they know they need to get the tries. And I think that's what it was for them. It was a 5-point win or nothing. And they go to the corner, but the line out is not straight. Very good contest from the Gloucester defending that line out as well. They're forcing them to throw slightly on their own side. But then at that stage as well, you're questioning the decision making from Edinburgh, whether they should be just taking the threes and then get that little bit of momentum and then go for the tries after that. But they kind of stick to the guns in terms of pursuing that, and then they work the ball back into the 22. They're camped on the Gloucester line. Now the difference though is they're winning penalties, and with penalty advantage, then it just makes it so much easier, I think, to finally get over. And Ewan Ashman crashes over under the post. That's converted for 18 points to 12. And now, it feels like there is some momentum there with with Edinburgh. And then Gloucester, when they win a scrum penalty, obviously they have noticed that, and instead of them going to the corner, they decide we've got to keep that scoreboard ticking over. So Barton makes it 21-12 from the tee. Douglas then does really well to get over the ball and win a penalty for Edinburgh. I think he got player of the match as well. I think he was being interviewed at the end. I didn't see the whole thing because I've got to get in here and record this as soon as possible. But he did really well to break down so many steals through the night. And that penalty, 5 metres out. But then Edinburgh tapped the ball, couple of recycles, and they don't look after the ball. Gloucester turn it over and clear. And again, you're thinking, oh, there's that sloppiness from the first half creeping in again, and it's going to cost them, a comeback win. But they work it back up to the line, and Young, he's going close. Really good offload from him to McConnell, who smashes over. There's a TMO check for Velicott, possible foot and touch at the beginning of that move, but the try stands converted for 21 points to 19. We then have a brilliant kick from Thompson that forces Atkinson to catch it and basically fall into touch, and there's line out in a great position for Edinburgh. Then they throw it to the tail. The maul breaks off. It's got momentum and it takes them over. It looks like Muncaster has actually scored. We have a TMO check, and the ball was lost a couple of meters before the line, but the reason why it was lost was because the maul was taken down illegally. So we have a penalty try to Edinburgh. Atkinson goes to the bin, and that's a try bonus point for Edinburgh. And they're now in the lead for the very first time in the game, 26 points to 21. Then Schoeman concedes a silly penalty, in his own half. It's about maybe like around 30, 40 meters out. And Gloucester, they decide that they're going to take the points instead of kicking to the corner. And they make it 26 points to 24. And I was sure Gloucester were actually going to go to the corner. And I was thinking like Schoeman may have thrown away that Edinburgh win, because the referee said to him a number of times, to leave it. And he didn't listen and gave away the penalty. But Gloucester were thinking, we'll get another chance, and then we can go for the win there. And I think that was a big difference between the two teams. Edinburgh, as I said, were going for the bonus point win. It was very clear on that. Gloucester were going for a win. And, any type of win would do them. And then we end up then with, Gloucester in the last minute of the game trying to run the ball from their own 22, not really getting anywhere. Edinburgh eventually win a penalty. They tap it. They get it off the field with the clock in the red, and that's full time, 26 points to 24. For me, a very entertaining game. Obviously very happy that Edinburgh won, and it's great to see that as well. Just in terms of, again, I know how frustrating it is watching Edinburgh, because I've watched so many of their games, and I always feel bad for the Edinburgh fans when they produce some of their more abject performances the way they actually did in the first half. But then you get that elation then when they actually pull off a win like this. So that's got to be so rewarding, I think, for the Edinburgh fans who are kind of very long suffering. But we're going to have a look at the stats, and then we'll come back and talk about each of the teams after that. So let me pull the official stats up here. And I'm just going to say as well before we start, I think honestly, it's embarrassing. Some of these stats, like I'm going on the official EPCR Rugby website, so the organisers of this competition, and I think it's embarrassing that there are stats on here that are clearly wrong. And you think like this is the premier rugby competition in the Northern Hemisphere in terms of club rugby, and they can't get basic stats right. Most of the stats are there, they're okay, but there's certain other stats that are absolutely clearly wrong. And you're going to see that, and if you watch the game, you'll know that they're clearly wrong, when we look at them. But we're going to start with the scoring. So 4 tries to 2 for Edinburgh. Again, that bonus point and very crucial for them, I think, to get that 5 points because that pool is so tight. Then next time we go on to attack. So meters made 332 to 222. Edinburgh, I thought they did, there was a lot of really good carries from the back row there as for them. And then they were kind of punching up the middle and then making meters out wide as well, especially in the first half where they just didn't have kind of that composure right at the end to either, collect the pass or to give a more sympathetic pass. And then carries 142 to 74. So, you're talking just over, probably about maybe 2.75, something like that, meters per carry, I think, for Edinburgh. And then we're talking about for Gloucester, 74 carries. So they're, pretty much, I think it is actually dead on 3 meters per carry for them. So they're getting a little bit more out of the carries, but again, a lot of the game played in their half of the field anyway. And a lot of those meters were kind of, were made coming out of their own 22, that kind of thing, working their way back up to halfway. Clean breaks then 9 to 6. Again, you're seeing there that, Edinburgh, they were making the chances, but especially in the first half, again, didn't have the finish for it. The defenders beating 33 to 17, so almost pretty much double for them. But then conversion rate, it's around about, it's just under 1 in 3 for Edinburgh. It's, just over 1 in 3 for Edinburgh. And it's 1 in 3 for Gloucester. So Gloucester slightly better at the conversion rate from defenders meeting the clean breaks, but it helped them certainly stay in the game and actually build up that lead, but it wasn't enough in the end. Offloads then 10-0. So Edinburgh, the ones looking to keep that ball alive, but the risk with that ended up with errors as well. Passes then 172 to 68. Possession 60% to 40, and territory 69 to 31. So you can see Edinburgh, most of the ball and most of that ball that they had was in the Gloucester half of the field as well. Then on to defence, tackles made 79 to 165. Edinburgh 81% is, I would say for Champions Cup level, it's round about a pass mark. You want to be somewhere in the 80s. At URC level, that kind of the pass mark, I think, goes up a little bit. Normally you would expect around about 85, but at this level, 81 I think is very respectable. 77% for Gloucester, not quite there really. In terms of that, again, you're looking to be in those 80s, and when you drop into kind of, they're on the cusp really of the mid 70s there with that, and you're very lucky if you can get a win on the back of that. Turnovers won then 8 to 6 in favour of Edinburgh, and then we look at set piece. So, and this is one of the things where the stats are definitely wrong. And we'll come to that in a second. But lineouts won 13 for Edinburgh, 7 for Gloucester. Edinburgh at 76%, Gloucester at 70%. And, both teams struggled in the lineout. And both teams, I think both teams did a better job defending the lineout than they did on their own lineout. But here's one of the stats that, if you watch the game, is wrong. Lineout steals, 0 versus 0. That's clearly wrong. That's just crazy. And it, not being able to show that is a big shame, because there were some brilliant steals from both teams in this game. Scrums won then 2 to 9, and Edinburgh at 67%, and Gloucester at 82%, but that doesn't really tell the story because it was Edinburgh who were the ones who were putting the pressure on in the scrum, and they won a couple of penalties. I think Gloucester did win one penalty, and that's why Edinburgh are at 2 out of 3, but it was mainly Edinburgh were on top in the scrum. On to then kicking. So kicks from hand, 29 to 23, kick meters, 621 to 685. There was very kicking game from the two teams, but there were a lot of contestables put up and retained kicks 8 to 5. And I felt like Gloucester did a better job in the first half of really contesting those kicks. Edinburgh in the second half, I think a bit better, but there were a few like towards the end where they're getting a bit tired, where Velicott will put the kick up and then you didn't have a chaser, and it was a bit easy ball for Gloucester. But you could see with Gloucester as well that, you know, even though they had the chance to run it back, they look for the contact and they recycle at that point. And then if we go on to then break down, so Rooks won 94 to 51, and one Rook lost to 0. And again, you're thinking like that can't be right, because the number of turnovers that happened in this game, and you know, penalties, etc. And then you look at the Rook success, 95% for Edinburgh and 88% for Gloucester. So how did they end up with 88%? They didn't lose any of the Rooks. You know, it just doesn't make sense. Next then, turnovers won in the Rooks, 8 to 6. And then another one, which again is very frustrating. Maul totals 5 mauls to 0, and maul meters 4 meters from Edinburgh to obviously 0 from Gloucester, because he didn't have any mauls in the game. But just think about that penalty try, how many meters Edinburgh mauled for that. There's no way that was like on its own, that was way more than 4. But as I've said before, that is actually the wrong stat, like a mislabeled stat. That's actually the number of successful mauls. They had 4 successful mauls out of 5, and that's why I can see a stat here that says maul success 80%, because that's what 4 out of 5 is. And we go on to discipline, and we see here penalties conceded 8 for Edinburgh is great. You always want to keep it in single figures, and they did that. And especially I think in that second half when they were trying to work the way back into the game, because if you're kind of 13 points down and then you're breaking your own momentum by giving away too many penalties, that really can be a killer for you. Gloucester 14 penalties conceded, and then they got the only card in the game, that one for Atkinson for conceding the penalty try. Okay, so let's talk about both of the teams. Gloucester, again, I think they took their chances very well. They, especially in the first half when Edinburgh were making errors, and they got that try just on the break, and it felt like if they did go on and win the game, that's kind of where they got the momentum from to do that. But second half, they only scored they only scored like, what was it, a couple of penalties in the second half, and it just wasn't enough. And it was kind of like, again, they were just trying to win by pretty much the smallest margin that they could, right? In terms of just taking their points from the tee. But on top of that, like when the game was tightening up, you've got to try, and you can't just think we'll get the 3 points and then we will somehow work it back down and get another the chance. You have to also look at the momentum in the game, and the fact that the penalty that they got wasn't because of the pressure that they were putting on, really. So they didn't really have the momentum in the game, and there was no real reason to suspect that even though they'd made it a 2-point game, that they were suddenly going to find momentum to get that chance for, a drop goal or a penalty or wherever they were looking for to win the game in the end. And for me, that's why I feel like they should have gone to the corner. And even if it meant that they score a try, and they don't convert and therefore the game is tied up, you then do have the momentum to potentially go for, more likely go for your drop goal or your penalty. But, what do I know? I'm just some idiot on the internet, right? But yeah, again, I think they took their chances well. They just didn't create enough in the game. Edinburgh, really was, very different from first half to second half. Not in terms of what they were doing in the game plan and how they, like, the chances that they created. It was more that they were, much more accurate in the second half. And also, I think part of the reason why they were more accurate in the second half was because they kept the ball a little bit more in the forwards. And you saw the tries were coming from the forwards rather than in the first half. The forwards were sucking into the defence and then they were going to the backs and looking to width and looking to where the space was, but that wasn't really working for them. And then in the second half, it's not like they just stuck it up the jumper and went route one all the time. It was more that they still had that ability to go wide when they could, and they were still trucking up the middle as well. But when they got into positions close to the line, they looked after, for the most part at least, looked after the ball better than they did in the first half. And because of that, then it ended up being the forwards who got over for the scores. But yeah, I feel like it was a very good performance from them. Just that ability to come back as well, because a lot of teams 13 points down at half time be thinking, oh, woe is us, nothing's going our way. They get into the second half and having basically produced a better rugby in the first half, you go into the second half and suddenly the other team score a try, that they've created, and now they've got the momentum. And then it turns into one of these ones where, they've maybe got, a 20-point lead, and for the rest of the game, that kind of hovers between, let's say, 13 and 20 odd points as the teams kind of exchange scores in the second half, but you never really get close to coming back. But Edinburgh dug in and it showed some great character that's been missing a lot from this Edinburgh team at times as well. And again, that comes back to, I think, the frustration that the fans feel, because they know that the abilities there, like there's a lot of really talented players in that team. And also just the fact of looking at Glasgow and what Glasgow have done in the past few years also has to be frustrating as an Edinburgh fan. But I think it's brilliant now. They've got their second win. And the weird thing is, I think in any other pool, that you would think that they pretty much be qualified for the knockout stages. But in this particular pool, it's not the case, because we start this round with Bath at the top on 6 points, and then it was Gloucester. No, it wasn't Gloucester. Who was it? It was Toulon or Castres, I think, at the bottom. It was Castres at the bottom with 4 points. So like 2 points between the top and the bottom. And it means that we knew coming into this round that this pool, in terms of qualification, like that fourth spot, is going to go down to the final round of games. But, whether Edinburgh qualify or not, I think this campaign has been a step forward for them. I absolutely hope that they do qualify. I also hope, that Munster join them in qualifying. It'd be great to see 2 URC teams coming out of this pool. But yeah, as I said, you put them into any other pool, and after 3 games, if they've got 10 points, you're pretty much saying that they're definitely through to the quarterfinals. And wouldn't it be great as well just to see both of the Scottish teams making, or not the quarterfinals, the round of 16? Sorry, I misspoke there. Probably said that a few times. The round of 16. But wouldn't it be great to see both of the Scottish teams making the round of 16? That's for me. That's what I want to see. Yes, I say it so many times. Yes, I'm a Leinster fan. Yes, I cheer for the Irish teams, but I genuinely cheer for the URC teams. I want to see URC teams doing well. I want us to get to a point where possibly, some year we have maybe 5 URC teams making up the 8 quarterfinalists. That would be an absolute dream for me, and then seeing maybe an all URC semi-final and maybe even someday an all URC final. That would be absolutely brilliant. And from that point of view, if it's 2 URC teams, I don't care which 2 they are either. Again, it's not just a selfish thing of, oh, well, as long as Leinster are there or an Irish team or whatever. I don't kind of think that way in terms of that. I just want to see these teams progress. And I genuinely back the teams from my own competition. So I think that this is brilliant for Edinburgh. Really great performance in that second half. And the thing now is, because it's so tight, they're going to Bath now in the final round, and Bath, are going to be looking to potentially secure top spot in the pool. So Edinburgh might be going there looking to get something out of the game. And, for me, it's a case of don't throw away the absolute, brilliant performance and hard work that you put in, tonight by going to Bath and just getting, played off the field, produce a performance that, you can be proud of and that the fans can be proud of. And if it's not enough and you go out, so what? I think the experience of, this campaign, whether they make the round of 16 or not, is going to be hugely important, I think, for the development of, that squad. And also then having done so well so far this year in the competition, the other thing then is make sure you're there next year. That it's not a case of Glasgow being the only Scottish team in the Champions Cup next year again. The way it has been kind of, in the last few years, it's basically been only one Scottish team in there. So, I think those are the challenges for Edinburgh. But just going to end and say, fantastic, guts and just that never say die attitude in that second half, gotten that win.